Hi everyone, it's Jen Skinner here, and today we're going to learn all about tints, shades and tones. And I must have subconsciously been thinking about it because yesterday when I was in my art room I started creating this piece, and it's exactly that: tints, shades and tones of one colour. And in this case it was teal. However, today's lesson is not going to be as complex as that. We're going to do something a little bit more simple, and instead of working with the teal, we're going to work with yellow. And so I've got a cad yellow medium, and then the only other two things that we need is a white, in which case I'm doing gesso, and also a black. So come along, enjoy the ride, have fun, and let's create with tints, shades and tones. Bye. Right, I'm about set up and ready to go, and the colour that I've chosen to tint, shade and tone is the colour yellow. I've got some masking tape, a few different size brushes, some black paint, some white gesso, which I'm going to use as my white paint. And then in these little bottles, this one actually has some black ink, some Winsor & Newton ink with a very, very fine tip on it. And this one has some white ink in it. So I might choose to do some liner work with those, I'm not sure. Now I've got a cloth for my fingers. You can see I've already got them really dirty because this bottle has leaked. Typical me. I've got a paint palette paper here and a cloth for taking extra moisture out of my brush, and just out of camera I've got some water here for washing my brush if I feel that I need to do that. Now I've turned the camera on a wide angle because I'm actually thinking of doing both pages, and I've got a little bit of a thought with what I want to do on both. But the first thing that I want to do is mark up this side with some torn masking tape. And I haven't done this before. We're just going to experiment and play. Now the fact that I'm tearing my masking tape means that I'm going to have a straight edge and also a torn edge. So that's going to give two different effects. I'm already getting it tangled. Two different effects on our page is what I'm imagining. And at the moment I'm just trying to go corner to corner. I don't mind if some of my masking tape is hanging off the sides. I need a little bit just to bring that right up to the edge. So I'll keep going with this and I'll come back to you. Okay, I've completely finished putting the masking tape on this page, and what I found was I didn't like the fact that it was so thick, so I started actually tearing the pieces into even smaller strips, and I really like that torn edge. So I'm kind of wishing I'd done a little bit more of that early on. Anyway, it is what it is, so we'll go with that. And I think I've pressed them all down, so it's going to be really interesting getting them up when they're all overlaid over each other. And then on the facing page here, I'd noticed that some of the paint from my previous artwork had come through, and so I just grabbed my UHU stick and I got another piece of paper out of the book, trimmed off the serrated edge here from where it was torn out, and I glued it on. So now I have a nice clear page. Now today we want to look at tints, shades and tones, and to put it simply, a tint is any color that's had white added to it. So as soon as we add white to a color, we have a tint. So this is a tint of the yellow. And what do we do? If it's dragging, add more water or add more paint. So here we go. Here's a tint of the original color, which in this case today I'm using yellow. Now a shade is when you add black. So here is a shade now of yellow. So we have a tint, and now we have a shade of our yellow. Now a tone is when a shade of grey has been added. So it can be a light grey, it can be a dark grey, any shade of grey when added to your colour. I'll take a bit from up the back. This now is a tone, and the tone has both black and white in it. So because black and white make a grey, that's exactly what you're creating. You're creating a subdued, toned down, greyish version of a colour. So I'm keeping my brush washed well, and I'll just get a little bit of the pure yellow and put it here. So here's a really good example. We have the pure colour, or the hue that we're working with. In this case it's yellow. Then we have a tint of yellow. We have a shade, which is where we added black, and then we have a tone where we've added grey. Now the grey, as I said, can be lighter or darker. We can have a really dark grey, and we can go even darker than that. That looks almost black. And we can also lighten our grey and make it even lighter than that. And in every instance, as soon as you start adding your main colour, you are getting a tone. So there we go, there's a tone. I can use some of the darker grey, get a darker tone. Okay, all of these are tones because it has both black and white in it. I'm thinking what I might do is, I've got masking tape sticking to everything now. I think I'll put a little bit of yellow over near my black, and also a bit of yellow near my grey, and go from there. So this page I'm going to just fill up with the random tints, shades and tones that I make. And on this page I'm going to go for a stylized landscape. So I've wet my brush, I'm taking some of the moisture off it. I want to start with the background being quite light, so I'm going to use a lot of the white. I'm going to tint my background quite heavily. This brush has obviously been left in the water, the paint is peeling off. naughty. Okay, so here I have a really, really pale tint of our main colour, and it's a little bit glary for you, isn't it? I'm trying to, can you see that a little bit better? So I can add more white to it if I wish. So there's our first tint before I wash my brush. I'm going to put some of that colour down over here. I'll probably forget to do that throughout. Anyway. So now I want to go a little bit darker. So there's not going to be quite as much white. So I'm still tinting, but it's not going to be quite as light as the previous tint was. So I'm gradually going to get just that little bit darker, and in fact I feel like that's maybe too dark too quick, so I might lighten that off in a few places, just so that we don't have such a rapid change. Okie doke. Now this time I want to go a little bit darker. In fact, I might bring it across like so. I might put that yellow here. Okay, now what I'd like to do is actually I'd actually like to tone it, so I'm putting a little bit of grey in my paint now, and not, it's a little bit dry. I'll add a little bit of water. So I'm toning it. I'm using grey. You can see the difference there, can't you? Under the lights, the paint dries very quickly, and I haven't put a retarder medium in, which I could do. So it means that I'm still adding water, which is not probably the best. Probably should be using a medium of some sort. Pick up a bit more of that grey. I'm actually blending it on the page. Let's try not to forget to put a little bit of that on. While it's wet, I could in fact get another damp brush and blend those edges in together if I wanted to, like so, so that they're not quite so stark. Now, where to from here? I'm thinking what I'd like is another tone. So I might actually get a little bit more black in that. And you can see that the colour is blending actually on my palette. Alright, put that some over here. Now, can you see that when you add black to yellow, you end up with a real green? I always find that fascinating, that black changes yellow to green. I don't know why, I just do. I think it's kind of cool. Get some of that. I might even put a little bit more up here. Okay, now I want to go even darker again. Darker green. Have I gone dark enough? That's the thing. So this is shading. That's all I'm doing. I'm shading the yellow. I'm going to bring that all the way down to the end. Where can I put this one? This is quite dark. It's quite neat painting up against the masking tape. Hopefully we'll get some crisp edges if I don't use too much water like then. Alright, now I want to bring another element in, and what I think I will do is have a really, really dark tone. I want it really, really dark. Nope, not dark enough. More black. More black. No, I want it even darker. I want it almost black. So adding a little bit of white with it means that I'm toning. Okay, here we go. I want like a jagged kind of rock effect coming. I'm thinking Lion King kind of rock jutting forward. I don't want it too neat and even. Great. Don't forget, I'm going to put that colour on. Now I don't need to do too much to that just at the moment, so I'm going to play. Look at this colour. When you tint it even more, you have a beautiful grey green. Here we go, another one. So there's probably an infinite number if you could, you know, determine what colour. I'm going to put a little bit of light, little few brush strokes there. Might get into this rock, add a little bit of texture too. Make this even darker, just to add a little bit of interest. Okay, now what I wanted to do with this one was use a stencil that I have, and I have a stencil of a stag, and I want to have him standing on our rock. Now if you don't have a stencil, something you could do is look through your cupboard for an old book, or go to a secondhand store and pick up a book that you can actually then very carefully cut out the image and make your own stencils. So, you know, doing the giraffe would be rather cool. I'm not sure how many more in here. The bird, if it was smaller, would be a nice one. These birds would work. You've got to be careful of your image though, because unless you paint in the tree, if you just used this lion as a stencil, he's going to look rather unusual in its shape. So you'd want to make sure that you replicate the design. So I've done that oftentimes, where I've cut my own stencil. Now this stencil should, well, I'm putting this stencil on upside down. I'm trying to make sure his feet all touch on the rock, can't have him floating. So I may not get as crisp a line as I want, because the stencil isn't going to adhere. It's not going to sit down flat enough. Anyway, we'll do our best. Some of the paint underneath is not dry, so I can see that I'm getting a grade effect, and that means I'm getting a tone. I probably should have put the hairdryer over it. Sometimes being impatient doesn't pay off. Try putting a little bit more of the black up here. I don't know if you noticed, I used a dry brush. I didn't want to add any extra moisture and further risk bleeding. Yeah, he bled a little bit. We'll see if we can fix that up. So now I just want to touch up, swap out of that brush. I'm not sure, it's a bit of a risk trying to get the black off here. Maybe I can just move it in. Alright, I probably should stop fiddling with him until he's properly dry. But anyway, there we go. There's a landscape where we've got tints and shades. And now I'm just going to put a little bit of extra texture in the rock, a little bit of shadow happening in here. Just so that it's got a bit more interest. Maybe a little bit under his feet. So tints, shades and tones, and now I can keep playing over on this side, making more variations than what I actually needed for my stylized landscape.